Hi everyone, and welcome to the PISA4U Network webinar. With us tonight, we have Dr. Richard Spencer, as you can see. The To The Point series is going to be a half-an-hour webinar series where we interview experts in their field. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Richard. Richard, can you please tell us a bit about yourself?
Hello, my name's Richard Spencer. I'm a teacher of 27 years standing. I teach at a large FE college in the northeast of England, and my speciality is teaching what's called A-level biology, which is academic biology to students aged 16 to 18 years old.
Okay. How long have you been teaching for?
So 27 years. I didn't go into teaching initially. I went into research, molecular genetics, and did some part-time lecturing, and enjoyed that far more than the research, and ended up training to be a teacher for pupils aged 11 to 18. And but I've always taught 16 to 18-year-olds in my whole teaching career.
That is a tough age group. I mean, all age groups are kind of tough to teach, but I feel like the older ones can definitely be tougher in some ways. So everyone, the To The Point series, the goal is to be able to give you takeaways that you are able to hear about now and then bring into your classroom tomorrow or on Monday when you might be feeling a little bit fresher. And something that Richard would like to talk about is the idea of thinking outside the box inside of your classroom and what that can bring in your classroom.
Right, so one of the things that I'm very keen on is variety in teaching and learning. My little motto for biology is variety is the spice of life science. And when I first started teaching, or first started to think of going into teaching, I asked my own biology teacher, would he recommend it as a career? And he said, well, it'll stick in your teeth after a while. You know, you'll be doing the same thing year in, year out. And that's something that I've never found, because every class is different. Every year is different. And, you know, and I change from year to year. And one thing that I always keep in mind is whether I've taught something 5, 15, 500 times, it is the first time for those students in front of me. So I think an element of variety is very, very important. Now, after a few years teaching, I was actually, how this started was I was taught a topic called Meiosis, which is about cell division. And I explained to my student with my hands how chromosomes moved and replicated and separated during cell division to form 2 cells. And the last thing I said to him was, it's a bit like a dance. Just walking home that evening, I thought to myself, well, maybe it could be a dance. And I found some suitable music, which was quite remarkable. It took me about an hour to choreograph it. I call it a dance, but it's simple hand movements. And something called the Meiosis Mamba was born. And I went to college and I just tried it out with my students, and they responded really positively. And that was the start of introducing dance and subsequently biology songs into my teaching. And over the years, I found that you know, it is worth taking those risks. You might not think that the average 16, 17, 18-year-old will participate, but they do, and they enjoy it. And there's something, it's not about learning styles, but there's something about physical learning that I think really enlivens a lesson, can break up a big chunk of theory, can bring in an element of fun as well. And it really does work. And a few years ago, some students bought me an anthology of poems by a comedian called Spike Milligan, and it was called A-Levels, and inside there was a poem that he'd written called A-Levels, and it mentioned about people being stuck into their school desks, being taught science, algebra, syntax, and the last word was, outside the ignorant are laughing and playing in the sun. And I thought, it doesn't have to be that way. Let's bring some sunshine into the lessons. Let's try different things, different activities. And I think for me, a good lesson is one that has that variety of learning opportunities, that students change pace and change state. And it's not all about all singing, all dancing. It can be about practical, it can be about simulations. But I think that kind of a really good lesson to me is well crafted. Takes a lot of planning, but it's worth it.
So I have two questions that come up from that. The first one is, it took you a while to find the music that you decided to use. What music did you end up choosing, is my first question. And the second one is, could you give us a brief example of one of your biology songs?
A brief example of what? Sorry, I missed the second.
Of a biology song.
Oh, biology song. Oh, yes, yeah, yeah. The Meiosis Mamba is a bit of a strange piece of music. So if I talk about another one, which is the DNA Boogie, which students do to Blame It on the Boogie by the Jackson 5. And I think most people would know that tune. You know, don't blame it on the sunshine, don't blame it on the moonlight. And that one is more like it's a whole class dance to teach the structure of DNA. It is available as part of the PISA4U resources. And you know, so one of the questions I get asked quite often is, do you have students who refuse to do it? And it doesn't even enter my head that students would say they didn't want to do it, because I think if, as a teacher, you are enthusiastic about what you're teaching and how you're teaching it, then that enthusiasm will carry a lesson along. Students will buy into whatever a teacher does if they respect that teacher. And I think that underlying relationship with the pupils is actually probably the most important thing. So, you know, if you are thinking about trying different teaching methods, your first base has got to be the relationship you have with your students. And that's something I work on from day one of a class. So I make a point in the first class my students have when they come to college of learning all the names, and it could be 20, 23 names in the first 5 minutes of the lesson. And I actually test myself in front of the class, and I have a way of doing it, and I do have a good memory.
Wait, hold on. What's the way? How do you do it?
So I have little stories running through my head of I'll hear a name and I'll think of an association or a song or something that's just going on in my head, and I learn the names very, very quickly, and then I test myself in front of the class. So it's high pressure stakes, because if you've forgotten one person's name, it can be a bit of a disaster. They can take it personally. But I think actually students really appreciate that big effort to do something like that, to make them feel welcome and make them feel part of a learning community. And if students feel part of a learning community, then they are prepared to do things that are a little bit unusual or a little bit maybe that other teachers don't do. And you know, 99 times out of 100, it really, really does work. So that I hope answers the question about the DNA Boogie and the music. Regarding songs are very interesting, because I find students are probably more comfortable dancing than they are singing. And I've thought a lot about this, and I think, you know, my generation, we sang at school, in school assemblies. I went to a Catholic school, we sang hymns on a morning, and it just became part of what you do. Regards students singing.
You cut out just then a little bit.
All right, sorry. The students feel a little bit more self-conscious with singing. But if I just tell you this anecdote of twins that I taught, a pair of identical twins. They were extremely bright, but also extremely quiet. And I don't think they talked in my lessons, let alone join in with a song. So I'll never forget one parents' evening. The girl's mother came to parents' evening, typically, you know, a parent who didn't need to come to parents' evening, because these girls were A-star superstars. But she said to me, do you know what? She said, I'm sick of hearing your songs. And I said, sorry? And she said, my daughters sing them around the house all the time. And I think I found that quite encouraging, actually, because I think maybe if students are self-conscious in the classroom, if they're going out and using them in their own learning in a different environment or in the home, then that's fantastic. And I've heard of students telling me that they do the DNA boogie in nightclubs as well. So I think if it helps them learn and it's a little bit different, that's great. So one of the songs I wrote is about the heart, and again, this is on the PISA4U resources, and it's called The Heart Song. And I won't sing it all because it's quite long, plus my voice is terrible, but it goes something like this. Circulation and the heart, in the lungs we're going to start on the left-hand side with oxygenated blood in the pulmonary vein, a vein with O2, that's insane. And it then goes on with the direction of circulation. It then continues with the direction of circulation, and again putting things into a song. The reason why I did that was not particularly that the music helps, but I think that students struggle with some of the words in biology simply because they're not everyday words. I mean, who goes around saying vena cava, atrioventricular valve, and so on? So by putting them into a song, it helps the students say the words, and that helps them to remember the words as well. And I'm a great believer as well in students learning by saying things, by talking to each other, and again, as I say, the songs really do help in that respect.
And so you work specifically with 16 to 18-year-olds. There's a lot of peer image at that age, and I'm wondering how you encourage your students both to speak up in class, but also to do these like cool dances and songs. How do you encourage that?
I think I know this sounds awful, but it's kind of a given that they will do it. So you could call it press ganging, or you could, I don't think it's press ganging. I just think they seem to get carried away by the enthusiasm, and at no point is there a kind of an opt-out, if you see what I mean. As they say, come on, let's just do it. And I did actually have one student that I can think of, and it is only one student, who refused to join in, and he said that he said he felt very uncomfortable doing it. And I said, that's absolutely fine. I said, I hope he gets something out of watching people doing it. And I came to realize that actually there was he was a bit distant from the other students in the class. And I'll never forget the time when probably the most of all the dances I do is called the Meiosis square dance. And it's based on kind of a country dance type thing. And we do it to Tell Me Ma, when I come home, the boys won't leave the girls alone. And this is the most complicated of all the dances. And as usual, I said to him, I said, oh, after break, we're going down to the sports hall. We'll be doing the Meiosis square dance. But, you know, if you don't want to join in. And he came back after break and he said, I'm going to join in. And I said, oh, right, great. And he did. And his whole relationship with the class changed. It was really funny. He really became more part of the class than he had. He was quite a reticent young man. And I am sensitive to, you know, that we do have different characters in the class. We do have different personalities. But because they're all group dancers, they're not individual, you know, they're not individual performances. And because I'm joining in, it really does seem to work. We have in the UK a thing called Ofsted, which is a government inspection. I had an Ofsted inspector walked into a lesson just as I was about to do, it was respiration actually, and it was to the Crazy Frog, which the Axel Crazy Frog. Right, so it is a bit over the top. And she was in the room 2 minutes and she just burst out laughing. She apologized to the class, and then after about 15 minutes she was inconsolable. She really enjoyed it, and she went to find the principal of the college straight afterwards, and she said, I've just seen Richard teach, and she said it was fantastic. And you know, and she did remarks on how it worked and how the students did join in and did buy into it. But I do come back again and again to that underlying relationship that you must have with your students. to get to that point where they will do and they will join in and they will be part of it involves a lot of groundwork of taking an interest in them as individuals, which I think good teachers do instinctively. And it's not something you can put on. I think students know if you care for them and if you care about them. And I think that has to be the bedrock, if you like, of anything that you do in teaching.
I think you're right, and I think you are a fantastic teacher. I'm still not over that song that you sang. I think I personally would have learned way better if it was put into a song. I have a mind that remembers all of the jingles from all of the commercials for my entire lifetime.
Yeah. And what's nice is students bring things back to me and say, oh, you know, this is on YouTube. This might be good in class. And it happened just this afternoon with a lesson on homeostasis, and somebody brought a song called Homeostasis to Justin Bieber song, because that is more their generation. I mean, I'm a bit old hat with my music. But she started singing it. I thought, you know, that is great. That's what I want students to be able to do, is to be creative for themselves and to find ways that suit them, and really to open people's minds to the fact that there are lots and lots of different ways of learning.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of different ways of learning, how do you bring cross-curriculum principles into your classroom?
Well, one of the things I am very, very keen on, and I think it's, as a science teacher, I've always been interested in music, I've always been interested in literature, and in history in particular. So I do like to, I do think that great teachers are great learners, and I think it's important that students see that, to see that, you know, you're not the be all and end all. You don't know everything. I mean, goodness knows, you know, an iota really of what there is to know. But I think to learn alongside students is really great. So one of the things that I did last year is, this arose from a biology class where I spoke about somebody who had failed a paternity test. And it turns out that they were their child's uncle. Now, I know this sounds it's all a bit complicated. And what had happened is that this man had absorbed his twin when he was in his mother's womb. So his own twin, if you like, was fathering his children, not him. And the student said to me, hold on though, they said, surely if...
Sorry, Richard, you cut out.
Sorry, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
I can, but you had cut out.
Oh, right, okay. Is that okay? So to cut a long story short, if somebody fails a paternity test as the child's uncle, there should still be DNA matches. And the students ended up contacting a professor in Harvard, because I couldn't answer their question, to find the reason, and the reason was to do with faults in the paternity test. The students then wrote a drama about it. They acted the drama, they filmed the drama, and they entered this for a competition, which it actually won a national competition, an international competition. So again, for the students to be able to ask a question and then run with the idea and use their skills in literature and their skills in media and their skills in drama to produce this. I think that's a fantastic bringing together of lots of different subjects.
What is something that has been helpful in terms of you overcoming nerves in breaking out of a traditional teaching role?
To be honest, I've never been nervous in breaking out of a traditional teaching role. I think simply because it's the reaction of the students that will encourage a teacher. Because if you try something different and it works, you get really good reaction from the students. Equally, I've tried some things that haven't worked, and I have that kind of relationship with my students that they can tell me, and, you know, I'm not defensive about it. I don't want to waste their time. I think students do like having fun in learning, but these 16 to 18-year-olds are very discerning, and if it's just about fun, they will see through the learning. There's got to be a serious point. So the DNA boogie, coming back to that as an example, the serious point is learning about the structure of DNA in a way that is really quite difficult out of the textbook, and even with a 3D model, but they learn the structure by being part of the molecule. And it is fun at the time, but they learn a lot from doing it as well. So I think it's not about nerves. I think it's about understanding students' reactions and having that conversation with them and asking them what they think. So I did a survey of students, and I think I got 150 comments back on what they thought made a good lesson, and I could categorize them quite easily. And the top thing that came out was variety. The bottom thing that came out was knowledge, i.e. teacher knowledge, because I guess they think we know our stuff, you know, we've got that far. But second from bottom was fun. And when I asked them about it, I said, you know, I thought...
What was the second from the bottom?
Fun. And I said to them, does that mean you don't want to have fun in lessons? They said, no, but not just fun for fun's sake. It's got to have a learning aim with it. So I think that's always something important to bear in mind, is, you know, what are the students learning? I always think that is the most important point.
Thank you for that. And I'm wondering, in terms of, do you have any advice for teachers who are designing programs and designing science classes and a starting place for them to create more engaging lessons like you do?
I would say put yourself in the position of somebody who's in your classroom, because they say that teachers, and I don't know if this is true, tend to teach in the way that they like to learn. But I think you've got to put yourself in the position of different types of student and what that learning experience is like. So, for example, I can think of students who are very bright, who would get through work very quickly. So what is the provision for them? You know, it's about differentiation. What kind of things can they do that doesn't just involve doing more of the same? What kind of challenges could be presented? And I think once you take away the imagine that you're being observed, sorry, that not that you're being observed, but the learning is being observed. And that is really a way of taking that away from yourself and putting it into the student experience. So that is the advice that I would give, is what's the student's experience of that 1 hour or 1.5 hours, 2 hours, however long the lesson is. How does it feel to be in that lesson? How does it feel to go through that learning journey of that lesson? And if you think, you know, and it's happened to me, I've realized that I've planned a lesson that is actually really too teacher-led, really could be quite boring by the end. How can you change it? You know, what could you do? What activities could you put into that lesson just to reinvigorate it? And they don't have to be massive. They can be a 5-minute activity, can really learn a lesson and can reinvigorate a lesson. And I think it's important to plan with that in mind.
And you had mentioned earlier that some of the things that you have tried have failed. We all try and fail at things. What ideas would you have for teachers who are maybe more shy than you in terms of getting back on the trying new things course and continuing?
Yeah, I mean, the things that, you know, people watching this might think, oh, well, you know, those are quite showy things that you, but not all of them are by any means. I mean, you know, they are a part of what I do, and they are a part of the variety. And I remember actually I did some teacher training many years ago, and a teacher walked out training and he said, I just can't do that, what you do. And I said, what can you do? What do you do? What are you good at? And you know, he told me, and I'm sure he was a very, very good teacher, and that made me very interesting actually in teacher training, because about 12 years ago I did something called subject learning coaching, and what I learned is that I don't think it's right really to tell teachers what to do. I think you can coach them and they will come to their own conclusions of what works for them and what things they can. And sometimes they can be really surprised of things that they maybe just never thought of. I think sometimes teachers are maybe afraid of what other people think if they're doing something different. But try it and see. If, you know, whatever your idea is, give it a go. And it doesn't necessarily need to be, you know, really showy or really dramatic or really artistic. It can be something that you and your students are comfortable with.
Okay. Another question in this is, let's say one of the teachers who's watching this right now thinks, okay, tomorrow is the day, trying something new, but they've been teaching the same way for 20 years, or at least since September. What could their first step be? Do you think that they should tell the class? Do you think that they should all of a sudden just turn around and say, let's sing a song about the heart? What do you think a good first step would be?
Do you know, I would always suggest that you make the students part of what you're doing. So if I've introduced something new, I'll say, right, I'm trying this out today. Let's see if it tell me what you think at the end, and then you get your feedback. The students, I think, appreciate that you've put some thought into trying to do something different. They also understand that you're not going to be defensive or upset if it hasn't worked, but that you are experimenting, that you're learning as a teacher. And as I say, great teachers, great learners. Learn from your students, learn from their comments, learn from their experience. And I always like this question, it would be better if. And that happened actually with the DNA boogie, because right at the end of it, I had a way of I said to my students, do you know what, I can't think of how to show the double helix. I said, I just can't think of how to do it. And this girl, I'll never forget her, Michaela, I still remember her name after, gosh, must be 12 years. She said, I know, and she made the students join their hands in a way that made a double helix structure, and it was so clever, and I could never have thought of that. And you know, she wasn't the most academic of students, but she had bags of personality, and she had the confidence, I guess, to direct the other students and what to do. And she had the confidence to say, as a teacher, I've got an idea, you know, that you can't come up with, but she didn't do it in that fashion. She recognized that she could think of a way to solve the problem. And I think that's fantastic when students contribute their own thoughts and their own changes to whatever you're doing. So yes, I think the first step would be, okay, I'm going. I mean, it's quite funny actually. Otherwise, the students would probably just say, "Oh, they've been on a course." I've heard them say that before. You know, new teaching method. Oh, they must have been on a course. So it's quite easy to default to teaching the same way, because sometimes it's easier than thinking outside the box. But I do honestly believe that.
Sorry, your last line cut out.
Sorry, I do think it pays dividends to try, and I think there's no harm in trying, and I think there's a lot of good actually can come out of it.
Definitely, brave teachers can make a huge difference in the lives of students, and this is a question of mine as well as a question from a listener. Is where did the inspiration come from? Did you have any teachers who inspired you to be this type of teacher?
Do you know that I do get asked this question quite a lot, and I can think of one teacher who really inspired me. And no, he didn't sing and he didn't dance, and I don't think he did anything particularly out of the ordinary. But the reason he inspired me is because he was probably the age I am now, and he was extremely enthusiastic. So that when he taught something, It was chemistry, actually, it wasn't even biology. So that when he taught something, you really felt his passion for the subjects, and you really felt interested in it. And actually, he was an A-level chemistry teacher. So these are the exams, you know, that you do age 16 to 18. And I remember sitting in his chemistry lessons thinking, oh my goodness, this makes sense. Because at the O-level, or GCSEs it's called now, that you study from 14 to 16, I really didn't understand chemistry at all. It was just, I learnt it, and it meant nothing. But I remember his enthusiasm, and I remember thinking, I want to be the teacher he is now when I've been teaching for as long as he has. And enthusiasm is essential to that. And if I go into a lesson not enthusiastic, I couldn't expect my students to be enthusiastic if I wasn't. I mean, you as a teacher have a responsibility for the mood of your class. And if you go in really, you go in saying, right, I'm doing this today and it's going to be really boring, but we've got to do it because it's on the exam, and you will be surprised at how often you hear that, then you've killed the lesson, basically. You've killed it.
Yeah, because they just have to hammer out the answers.
Yeah, they just think, oh, well, okay, he's not interested in it. Yeah, we need it for the exam, but, you know, it's like going to the dentist. You've just got to go and suffer the pain for the treatment. And if I do think of a lesson that's like that, and sometimes it is very challenging with subjects, you know, I just try to think, what could I do that would just add that little bit of spice to the lesson?
That's an interesting thought as well. Kind of each time you go through a lesson, you think like, what is the little bit of spice that I can add into this? And I think that's the passion piece. It's because you want the lesson to come across, and you want your students to receive it well. You're excited about what you're doing.
Yes. So this afternoon, I mean, when I say spice, and I hope people don't think I'm always talking about, you know, drama and dance and music. It's not necessarily that. It can be a very simple activity. It can be a puzzle. It can be just something that's a little bit different from what they've been doing, that just provides another way of thinking about the topic. I mean, this is a very simple one I did this afternoon, and students had to learn these particular definitions about homeostasis. Well, you know, with the best will in the world, it's quite difficult to make definitions exciting. So I just gave an activity in pairs, and they had to work out jumbled sentences and put them in the right order. And I thought that's a much better way of learning the definitions, because they have to think. Now, if you're just writing a definition on a board or putting it on a PowerPoint and the student's copying it down, you know, really, what are they learning? Whereas at least if yes, they've got to learn these definitions, but let's do it in a way that's a little bit different, maybe to what they've done before. And as I say, it really does work.
Sorry, I muted myself. That is super valuable. Thank you so much. Overall, this has been an incredibly informative and interesting discussion. I think what you've talked about are tips and tricks and things that can be applied from pre-kindergarten to forever learners, and how passion really shines through as well. It's incredibly important. I wish we could continue speaking, but our time is up. However, one of the viewers gave a really great piece of homework that I would like to relay to the other viewers right now, which is in the forum. If you could write a bit about a teacher that inspired you, that would be fantastic. I will do it as well as Sabina and Richard. If you could write a bit about a teacher who inspired you, that would be great as well. Thank you so much for your time. And
thank you for your time, Jennifer and Sabina. I've really enjoyed it. It's been my privilege.
We will be having a webinar series again after the holidays, where we have a Real Talk in Education talk next Wednesday with 2 other members of the 2017 PISA4U course from last year, and thank you again. And I'm definitely going to be looking up your songs in the library. I'm really curious to hear. them all. Is it an optional video or is it just the lyrics?
Oh, well, thank you to everybody who's tuned in as well. So I hope you've found something of use.
Bye, thank you.
Okay, goodbye.